Okay. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar on all things Passport to Careers eligibility. Before we get started, I think we'll just do intros in case there's anyone on the line who's not met myself or Dawn before. My name is Fred Kingston, and I work at College Success Foundation. I'm the program manager for our statewide initiatives team, and the focus of our work plan is to support implementation for Passport to Careers. So myself, Molly Donahue, and Donna Quach spend a lot of time on college campuses working with folks who are designing their programs or implementing their programs, supporting Passport scholars. And another thing that we do is we facilitate these webinars. We've been doing about 2 a month throughout the academic year. Dawn and I are each going to share a fun fact as we get started. So I think I'm gonna share that when I was 10, my crowning achievement at 10 years old was I was in a chess club, and I went to a national chess tournament and ranked 32nd in my age group nationally. And it was the apex of my competitive chess career.
All right, and I'm Dawn Cipriano McCafferty. I manage the Passport to College or Passport to Careers program with the Washington Student Achievement Council in Olympia. And let's see, I've been working with the program since it started in 2007, and I've been at the agency for much longer than that. My fun fact, oh, Fred, you made this tough. Let's see, this is a lot of people know this, but I love dogs. I am crazy about dogs, and I am a rover provider on the evenings and weekends.
Cool.
I don't know what else to say.
Whoa, I got a challenge, a chess challenge from Malcolm. I accept your challenge. All right. Well, thanks for letting us do introductions like that. We have 18 folks with us on the webinar, and some more might join as we continue, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I'll say as we get started here that Dawn and I don't have an hour's worth of material. It'll probably take us 20 or 30 minutes to go through the slides today. But our hope was that you all would really actively use the chat function today and chat in with your questions so that we can engage you and answer the questions that you have about eligibility. I have Donna and Molly in with us. Maybe they'll just peek in and say hi really quick. Can one of you pull up, are you both on the platform? Can you make sure, I forgot that as we go here, the chat, it's hard to monitor chat.
I'll get on.
So, and maybe you can even sit next to me so I can just see your screen, Molly. Then you have to read me the chats. So with Molly's help, I'm gonna monitor all your chat questions. And some of the information we're gonna go over is pretty basic. I know from looking at the list of folks on the screen that you probably know a lot of some of the things we're gonna cover today, but what I'd love for you to do is, if you have questions about practice, to raise those as we move through the presentation today. And at the end, we are gonna have time for more discussion and question and answer over chat. Okay. So our learning outcomes for today is we're gonna go over updated eligibility criteria, and for each category of Passport Scholar, we're going to talk about how certain categories of students are verified differently so that you all can understand if you're going through the verification process with a student, how that happens, and the differences and sometimes in the process and turnaround times for how long it takes to verify students. We're going to talk a little bit about the apprenticeship opportunity pathway. What I want to say here is our next webinar is going to be a deep dive on the apprenticeship opportunity pathway, where we're going to cover a lot on where we are programmatically with that rollout. But today we're just going to talk about a few updates, especially focused on eligibility for apprenticeship students. We're going to cover the phased expansion, so how eligibility will change between now and 2020. And then we're going to talk at the end about what do students have to do in order to verify that they are Passport to Careers scholars. Like I said, we're hoping for your questions as we go. This platform doesn't allow you to verbally just speak up, so you got to use the chat function. I hope you'll do that, and we'll monitor questions throughout the presentation. Sometimes we get a lot of questions, and if that's the case and I don't get to respond to every question, then we'll make sure we follow up afterwards individually with you, and we'll have at least 15 minutes at the end for a discussion, and if we don't use that time, then that's fine too. All right, Dawn.
Hi, so last legislative session, the program name was changed from Passport to College to Passport to Careers. And what that did was it gave us, Passport to Careers is like an umbrella under two different pathways. The first way is Passport to College, and the second pathway is Passport to Apprenticeships. Also, part of the legislation is the setup program, which serves students between the ages of 13 and 21 through high school graduation and into 1 year of their either college or apprenticeship opportunity.
Great. So from here on out, we are going to be just using the acronym PTC to refer to Passport to Careers and both programmatic pathways, unless we're speaking specifically about Passport to College or Passport to Apprenticeships. So that's just a clarification about language as we go forward in the presentation.
So just as a starting point, we did want to point out different websites that are resources for different populations. So the first is the wasac.wa.gov website, and the audience for the WASAC website is primarily policymakers, financial aid administrators, legislators, but in the future, it will likely hold the new information for the Passport to Careers program. And we are in the process of writing this new, the new language and developing the wireframes for it. The readysetgrad.org website is geared towards students and families. And there's a tremendous amount of resources available on this website, including information on college preparation, sources of financial aid, both federal, state, and private financial aid. And then the WASFA application for your undocumented students is also available on the readysetgrad.org website. And then the Washington Passport Network is developed primarily for practitioners. So the designated support staff, the financial aid administrators, independent living setup staff, treehouse, foster care district liaisons, and other practitioners. Information that could be helpful is a blog. There's a ton of resources available on the site, including the Passport program manual, contact lists. There's how to develop your viable plan, a tremendous amount of resources, how to even use your incentive grant funds. Additional information include information on the state conference and an events calendar.
Thanks, Dawn. And so just for this presentation, something I'd say is that as we go over materials, including there's an eligibility matrix that shows the phased expansion, shows that information visually. There's a form that we're going to show you, the consent form for students that students fill out to send in to determine their eligibility, and some other documents we're going to reference. Those are all available on WashingtonPassportNetwork.org to download. If you go to the resource section and then click on college, it'll expand that window and you'll see all those documents here. They're available to you that way.
I did also want to mention that the readysetgrad.fostercare website is currently where we have the most updated information for Passport students, because the program is changing so rapidly, it is the website that we've been using to kind of be the bridge in between what is currently existing and what we're planning on developing in the future. So there's a tremendous amount of resources available on that readysitegrad.org/foster care website as well.
All right, so let's talk eligibility. Due to the passage of a Senate bill last year, we have expanded the Passport to Careers eligibility for foster youth significantly. As many of you know, starting in 2007, this program was really for students who turned 18 in care or who aged out of foster care. So now there's there's completely different eligibility criteria for foster youth going forward. So the first thing is that right now, any youth who's had any experience in foster care, and I should say specifically an out-of-home placement, after the age of 15, will be eligible for Passport to Careers. And it does not matter what type of foster care they are in. So students who experience state foster care after the age of 15 are eligible. Unaccompanied refugee minors who are in this care of the federal government and live in Washington State are also going to be eligible. And students who are in tribal foster care but not state care, so they were in the care of only of their tribal child welfare entity, are also eligible. Previously, Passport was only for those in state foster care, but we've added federal and tribal youth. I'll also mention, although it's not written down here, or yeah, it is, including ICPC cases. So ICPC stands for the Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children. And this is when a student, let's say they live in Spokane, they're placed with kin or a caregiver in Spokane, but their case was in Idaho. If they live in Washington State, although their case is in Idaho, they now are eligible for Passport to Careers, whereas before they were not because their case was in a different state. But if they live in Washington State on an ICPC placement, that they're now eligible. So what we've tried to do is eliminate the silos where certain foster youth were eligible for the program before and others weren't, and now it doesn't matter what type of foster care you're in. Students have to be enrolled half-time. They have to enroll at an eligible institution before their 22nd birthday, maintain state residency, and be pursuing their first bachelor's, associate's certificate, or apprenticeship. They can't pursue a degree in theology, and they must maintain satisfactory academic progress to remain eligible throughout their educational journey.
I did want to point out, we're asked quite frequently, why can't students pursue a degree in theology? And it's primarily because it is a state-funded program, and there are clear laws about the separation of church and state. So a student can attend a private institution that, you know, like St. Martin's or Pacific Lutheran University, but pursuing a degree in theology is not allowed.
Great. Okay, so for foster youth, these are the eligibility criteria, but let's talk about how they're actually verified.
Okay, so we've been working with the state, with the Department of, it used to be the Social and Health Services, now it's the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. We've been working with them since 2007 on a data exchange. So what happens is basically a student completes a consent form and they send it into our agency or provide it to the institutions. We get it entered into our system, and then DSHS does a manual check where they research the student's case, and then they document whether or not the student was in foster care after age 13 and whether or not they're eligible for the passport program. We are currently working on making this a more efficient process. As you can imagine, with the expansion of the program, it's taking quite a bit of time to verify each student, research their case and see if they're eligible for passport. So we're working on something that we call a robots to robots data exchange, where it'll be a more streamlined process and we'll have more accurate data much more quickly. So that's what's going on with the state. With tribal youth, we had consulted with our Attorney General, and because of the different governances between each or at each of the tribes, it was recommended that WASAC develop a tribal care verification form. So once we receive that, then we'll be able to go ahead and update a student status in the portal for the institutions to be able to access. With federal foster youth, and these are the unaccompanied refugee minors, we are working with DSHS to create a similar data sharing agreement to what we're working on with DCYF. So again, we're looking for a more streamlined process and to get this information out to institutions and to students much more quickly. I see we have a question.
Yeah, so Malcolm asked, Malcolm is asking if a student is pursuing a course of study, but and kind of along the way they earn a certificate as part of that longer program. Does that cause any problems with their eligibility?
Not for passport. I don't think it would.
So let's say a student they're at a 2-year school, they earn a certificate, but they still are pursuing their 2-year transfer degree. Then when they get that certificate, they just keep drawing down their passport.
Yeah, it shouldn't interfere. I think about like nursing programs where you can get a CNA and then your associate in nursing and then your BSN and your MSN and all that. So I think about that, and those students, we definitely don't want to say that they're not eligible for passport. So yeah, I think it would still be fine.
Great. And for those of you who maybe don't know this, like off the top, students are eligible, assuming that they, age-wise, don't hit age 27, which is when they're no longer eligible to receive their award. Students can receive passport for 15 terms or the equivalent. Mm-hmm. So just so you all are aware. Another question from Sarah. If say a student is 21, was an ICPC, and aged out, I assume aged out of foster care, and they're attending college part-time and haven't made SAP in the past, but they are currently making SAP, would they be eligible?
That sounds like a pretty specific situation. So what I would recommend with that is to give me a call or to talk to the financial aid office. Because we, again, like I said, we don't want to assume that someone is not eligible just based on prior experience, but I'd like to take a look at that. The law did change in July. So ICPC youth should be determined eligible. But I'd want to look at that more deeply.
Yeah, and hey, Sarah, I'm just trying to, I want to make sure I'm getting the crux of your question. So feel free to chat back in. Yeah, I'm trying to determine if your question is really about ICPC or if it's about SAP. Mm-hmm. So feel free to chat in a more specific question about SAP. Karina asks, is the 15-term max based on full-time equivalent terms?
No, not necessarily. So unlike state need grant QER, the quarters of eligibility remaining, is adjusted based on the student's enrollment. For passport, if a student attends a quarter and they're only going, half time, that's 1 quarter used. If they're going full time, that's 1 quarter used. So it doesn't matter.
So it doesn't matter if they're attending half or full time. Every term that they draw down their scholarship funds is a term that they've used up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Laura asks, okay, Don, this is a common, frequently asked question. Do students are they ineligible at age 26 or at age 27?
So that's a very, very good question. There's a little bit of age confusion with that because the initial RCW said that a student could use Passport up to age 26. And so when we had met with our initial planning committee, we had just determined that is it up to age 26 or is it 26 through their 26th year? So there was a little bit of confusion about that. And so the program's WAC says up to age 27.
So we're all sitting here listening to, and so just to repeat, it says until age 27.
That's what the WAC says, yes.
Awesome. Okay. That does come up a lot. So thanks for asking that, Laura.
Not to say that it won't change, because I know that we are looking at updating our WACs to align them with the new program law. But right now it says age 27.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, they have to activate before age 22.
Yes, before their 22nd birthday.
If I'm 21 and I enroll for the first time, I can activate my Passport.
Yeah.
And then I get it until I turn age 27.
Yes.
And I know we've had some special cases where a student turns age 27 in the middle of a term or right and in those cases, I know that you've advocated and it's an individual student by student thing, but in those cases where it's really, really close, I know you've been able to err on the side of the best interest of the student.
I try to, yes. But and again, it does matter, if the student is really close to being completed or if it's, they're turning 27 in the middle of the quarter or whatever it is, it really depends. But for the most part, if they're turning 27 within the quarter, then yes, they would continue receiving it through that quarter, but wouldn't be eligible after that.
Great. Another question about, so it sounds similar to the one we had before. Does a completion of an associate's degree affect continued eligibility towards a second associate's or certificate?
Not for Passport. It does for state aid grant, but not Passport.
Great. Okay. So it sounds like with Passport, if they're continuing their educational journey and they haven't yet earned their first bachelor's, then whether they've earned more than one associate's or certificate, they can continue to use the scholarship.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. I just want to pause and ask Malcolm, Karina, Sarah, did we answer your questions adequately? Sarah, did you want to try to come back with a little more specific question about SAP? Just let us know. Just type it in if you do, and we'll come back to it. Okay.
Can I make another point just really quickly? I'm looking at the word verification of foster care on this one slide, and there's a difference between verification of foster care and verification for financial aid purposes. So I want to make that distinction. In this circumstance, we're talking about foster care, a student's foster care status.
Right. Oh gosh, yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
We're not talking about their FAFSA.
No, verifying their
documents being verified. We know that our low-income students get selected for verification by the federal government. That's not at all what we're talking about. Yeah, we're talking about verifying a student's eligibility as a Passport to Careers scholar based on their foster care experience.
Yes.
Great point, Don. Yeah, we should change that in the presentation to make it less confusing. Okay, if you have any other questions about foster care eligibility, let us know, but we're going to go next to unaccompanied youth homelessness. So the new law, for the first time, states that unaccompanied homeless youth will become eligible for Passport starting July 1, 2019. And just so you know why, I think that there's some questions about why unaccompanied homeless youth are included in this program. It was because advocates who advocated for this expansion have the point of view that's backed up by data that the majority of youth who are living on their own without stable housing in our state are young people who had some contact with the child welfare system, but were not removed from home and put into foster care, but who, because of their experience of abuse or neglect at home, left home because it wasn't safe. So the thinking of advocates was that, you know, these are young people that we care about who have very similar experiences that lead to their homelessness as students from foster care. They just received from the perspectives of the advocates an inadequate child welfare response to their situation. And so we, as a community of advocates and practitioners, advocated for those students to be included in this program because we think that they really need the same kind of support that students from foster care need to be successful in their higher education. Having said that, I think there's a lot of different opinions about their inclusion, but going forward, they are going to be eligible. So the law says that to be eligible, youth have had to have experienced unaccompanied homelessness the year prior to the academic year when they're verifying their eligibility. The way that they provide documentation of their unaccompanied homelessness can happen different ways. Sometimes it will be through the McKinney-Vento liaison at their high school, but it can also be through another professional who works with unaccompanied homeless youth. So it could be a case manager, it could be a shelter worker or a housing program worker, or someone that works in a drop-in center, or a outreach worker or similar professional case manager or school employee. Also, we know that you can imagine situations where unaccompanied homeless youth have no connection to a professional, and in those cases, that the student can actually contact the Student Achievement Council directly. And to be clear, unaccompanied means not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. So we have a lot of homeless students in our state. Some of our data says there's over 40,000 students just in K-12 who are experiencing homelessness and they're living with their families. But we're not talking about that huge group of homeless students. We're talking about only those who are usually adolescents living on their own and are unstably housed. And the homelessness definition that's used in the law is the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness, which the main thing there is that students who are couch surfing or doubled up are considered homeless, whereas the HUD definition of homelessness does not include that group.
I see Malcolm has a question about an age requirement. It does follow the same age requirement as the regular passport, so they need to enroll prior to age 21 or 22. And yeah, it mirrors exactly the same.
Great. So let's talk about the plan. So starting July 1, students will be getting verified for the first time, and so Dawn is going to explain the plan for that.
Mm-hmm. So we're starting to get a ton of questions about this, and schools and the designated support staff on campus, setup providers and IL providers are trying to figure this out. And honestly, so are we. So this week I sent out an email to the institutions and student supporters to try to begin unraveling this confusion. So in most cases, the financial aid office will do the verification of a student's unaccompanied homelessness. And I just want to make clear that this does not deviate from the current practices that are being currently done on college campuses in the financial aid offices. And then again, students should be able to gather documentation of their unaccompanied homelessness from their McKinney-Vento liaison. And then as Fred had mentioned earlier, WASAC will do the verification for those students who have a murkier situation where they, it might not be as straightforward as another student who has a McKinney-Vento liaison. So we will do kind of an application process, or what I'm expecting is an application process for those students. And we're working with OSPI to come up with a form that would accurately capture this information. I also wanted to note here that, especially with this student population that we're working with, foster care and unaccompanied homeless youth, who are pretty transient, who might lose important documents, I would, ask these students, or try to ask these students, to develop an electronic file and save important information in a cloud so that they can access it. Just a couple of weeks ago, I attended a regional meeting, and one of the McKinney-Vento liaisons explained that they may not have information for an unaccompanied homeless youth after the school year ends, because they basically close the case and then reopen the case the next academic year. So it is important for, and I don't know if that's the case in all school districts, but it's important for these students to keep information electronically, and so that they can access it from any computer that they might be using. So if they have a phone, if they're on their phone, or if they're on a college campus, they should be able to get that information electronically. I see we had a question. I can't read it though.
Yeah, that was a, let me see in the chat. Okay, from Laura, your email Tuesday says in the year prior to their post-secondary enrollment. Yes. So if they're at a high school for a year before starting college, who is documenting that they are homeless?
That's a case where the student may have to come to WASAC, and we would have to do that determination.
Right. Well, and I'll also say in my experience working with this population, it's in certain communities, it may be likely that young person is engaging with other homeless providers. Yeah. So in a community like Seattle, King County, in a community like Everett, in a community like Olympia or Spokane, there are some really skilled homeless youth services providers that do outreach, housing, education and employment support. And so those folks, like McKinney-Vento liaisons, can provide the documentation per the law that the students need. So whether they're in school or not, if they're engaged with one of those types of case managers or professionals, then they can be their person who provides that documentation. Now in other communities, especially rural communities, there may not be those types of services, and I think that's where we know there are gaps, and that's particularly why WASAC is inviting students who have no connections to professionals to connect with them directly when they want to get support through Passport, but they don't have someone to verify their experience. Is that right, Dawn?
Yeah, absolutely.
Misstate. Okay. Hillary is asking, does the word guardian mean a legal guardian? What about a relative who is informally raising the youth for an unspecified length of time?
Those are things that we'll have to dig into deeper. I honestly don't have a response to that question right now. We're just starting to touch on the issue of unaccompanied homelessness.
Mm-hmm. It's a great question, Hillary.
It is. I believe that, if the student is not with a supportive adult, the law says parent or guardian. Now, we'll have to dig deeper into what exactly that means and the definition of those things in order to come up with a policy or practice for the schools to follow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my guess is that, well, I don't want to speculate. It's a great
Yeah,
question.
it's hard.
Yeah. Okay. Um, are there any other questions about homeless youth eligibility or passport verification? And if there are, go ahead and chat them in and we'll come to those. Oh, Dawn, I did have a question and wanted you to speak to this. Once the student gets their flag in Seesaw, so they're verified due to their unaccompanied homelessness experience, then do they only have to be verified just one time, like foster youth, or
that's the goal that we're working toward. That's what we're hoping for.
So students are verified, they're passport scholar, and then they have the same 15 terms or equivalent to get the scholarship as like a foster youth.
Yeah, that's what we're working toward.
Yeah. I frequently meet students staying with their boyfriend or girlfriend's family. What's their status? Homeless, unaccompanied. I don't want to speak for Dawn. I will say that in the homeless youth serving community, this is a student that meets the definition of the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness, as a girlfriend or boyfriend's family does not meet a guardian standard. And the practical kind of test for that is, those are often very tenuous living situations that can break down very quickly. And so you see students living with their partners' families, and then there's some type of conflict, and then they're out on the street. So I know that Dawn and her team will need to think carefully about all these different specific situations for purposes of verification. My gut is that the sort of standard of practice in the youth serving community is that this wouldn't meet in this situation, that student meets the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness.
I think it would also depend on the student's, bio family and the situation with them. If it was the student's decision to move with their partner, or if they were kicked out of their bio family's home, or whatever it is. So I think these are really good questions for us to begin even talking about these types of situations.
Great. So Dawn, as we are compiling these notes from the chat today and going forward, can folks expect for like a frequently asked questions document or something that we can create?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, that would be a good way to get answers in writing. Okay. Let's talk about apprenticeship opportunities and eligibility.
Okay, so through the apprenticeship opportunity, sorry, I got distracted by a question.
Yeah, let's hit this one before you go to apprenticeships. So the financial aid administrator's use of professional judgment to make the determination.
Read it again, I'm sorry.
Karina is asking, would a financial aid administrator's use of professional judgment or discretion to make an unaccompanied homeless youth determination count?
It possibly could.
I think that's what you're saying when you're saying that it's like very similar to the current process, where once the administrator is empowered currently to make these determinations. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. So for students that are choosing to take the apprenticeship opportunity pathway, these students can receive assistance with tuition for classes, fees, work clothes, rain gear, boots, and occupation-related tools. And then the legislation has directed WASAC to contract with a non-governmental organization for administrative duties of this pathway. And what that basically means, looking at the scope of work, it basically means that this organization will be doing outreach and communication with students. They'd be helping the students with employment navigation, support services, financial assistance, training, and they would be responsible for reporting this information back to WASAC. I wanted to, another point of confusion that we've been encountering is that some community colleges offer apprenticeship courses, and you know, people are asking, are they apprenticeship opportunity pathways, or are they passport to college pathways? And ultimately, if the student qualifies for financial aid, they would be a college pathway. If they are not qualifying for financial aid, then they would likely be an apprenticeship opportunity. And you know, the other way to think about it is if a student is affiliated with an organization in the community, or if they are affiliated with, most likely with a, what's it called? I am totally spacing this right now. A union, sorry. Or an organization like ANU, or the Aerospace Joint Apprenticeship Committee, then those students would likely be apprenticeship students and not qualify for passport to college. And I wanted to also explain that students can participate in either program, but they can't do them concurrently. Does that make sense?
Great. I think it's really helpful to hear about financial aid because we know there's a lot of apprenticeship programs connected to our community and technical colleges. So even if a student is pursuing an apprenticeship pathway, if it's college connected and they're receiving financial aid, then they're passport to college.
And know that this is a whole new world for us too. So that it's been very, very, very interesting to unravel this and understand the whole world of apprenticeships as well.
All right. So with the caveat that our next webinar is going to be a deep dive on apprenticeship opportunities and really explaining where we are and in the rollout of the program more in detail, let us know if you have any questions right now about what was just shared. So I mentioned when we were talking about foster care eligibility that currently, if a student's had any experience of foster care after age 15, they're eligible. But by 2020, the goal is that students who've had what will happen is that if any student who's had a foster care experience after the age of 13 will be eligible. So there's going to be this phased rollout where right now it's age 15, starting July 1, 2019, it's going to be any experience in foster care after age 14, and then starting July 1, 2020, will be at any experience in foster care after age 13. And the reason behind that is that we wanted to align eligibility for passport to how the FAFSA determines independent student eligibility based on the foster care question. So it's really confusing how students who've had experience in foster care after age 13 currently can be determined independent student on their FAFSA, but then not receive passport. So by 2020, those two, passport and the FAFSA, will be aligned. You can also see in this matrix that unaccompanied homeless youth, again, go live July 1, 2019. And this just puts good visuality to kind of all the other things we've talked about today. So this eligibility matrix is available on the website, the WashingtonPassportNetwork.org. So you might just want to go ahead, download this, print it out, and have it on your desk if you think it would be helpful. Anything I missed there, Dawn?
Nope, perfect.
Okay, so this is our last slide before Q&A. We just want to look at this through the lens of a student. So for students, what are the steps they need to take in order to determine if they're a passport scholar or not?
So the first thing that a student needs to do for any kind of financial aid for the federal government or for Washington financial aid is to complete the FAFSA. Again, like I had mentioned earlier, if the student is an undocumented student, they can complete the WASFA, which is available on the ReadySetGrad.org website. And undocumented students do qualify for the state need grant and for Passport as well. And then the second thing we need to do is collect a consent from the student, and this helps us determine whether or not the student is eligible for Passport, and then allows us to share their eligibility with the institutions. Oftentimes, the student's consent is provided when they complete their FAFSA. Other than that, we do have the Passport consent form available, which we'll talk about in a second, or they can provide their consent through the Common application, which is an application that Passport shares with the Education and Training Voucher Program.
Great. So, and something I just want to reiterate is that students can submit the consent form at any time. Mm-hmm. So they can even fill it out before they fill out the FAFSA. They can so if you have students now who are age 15 and they're in foster care, they can fill out the consent form to figure out if they will be eligible for Passport once they finish their secondary degree or credential and go to college. So that might be helpful for students to know ahead of time. So then once the student gets their consent and is determined eligible, then again, to activate their scholarship, they need to enroll prior to their 22nd birthday. And Dawn made this point when we were developing this slide that, it kind of gets lost that students must also apply for financial aid in order to receive any need-based financial aid. So they have to, both enroll and apply for financial aid. And finally, we recommend that with support, a student reviews their financial aid package, and with support meaning with a supportive adult, with a case manager, or with a DSS or financial aid administrator on their college campus to ensure accuracy of their package and to understand the financial picture. So there are rare cases where students do all the things that they're supposed to do, but for some reason, the aid doesn't come through correctly. Just like with any aid, there are times where systems don't fully work, and then mistakes have to be corrected. But because of our students' situations, if they don't have an advocate looking at their package with them, sometimes they don't catch the mistake on their own. Yep. Those are the steps.
And then I also wanted to mention that administrators can encourage students to complete a scholarship seeker profile on the washboard.org to find additional scholarships. And then I mentioned the Education Training Voucher Program for foster youth, the Governor's Scholarship that's managed by the College Success Foundation, and then Fostering Scholars is a wonderful opportunity for students at Seattle University. And then for those students who are eligible for state financial aid, they receive, if the student is in foster care and under age 24, they do receive priority funding for both the state need grant and state work study programs. So this right here is a consent form that I had mentioned earlier. I did want to point out that we have made updates to this consent form. You'll see here that we have a box for the student where the student can indicate if they were a state dependent, a federal refugee, or a tribal dependent. We did need to have that separated out so that we knew what source to go to verify students' eligibility. The other piece is that we've changed the consent language on the bottom so that the student is aware of who we might be sharing this information with, and so that we are allowed to communicate with the appropriate parties in order to support the student. This website, or this consent form, is available on the readysetgrad.org website. I believe we also have it on the Washington Passport Network website and on the WASAC website. So always, really make sure you're using the most updated form, because it is being updated pretty frequently.
Great. Okay, so we do have about 10 minutes, and I'm curious if folks have Any questions that have come up for you we didn't get to answer today about eligibility, or if maybe some of the discussion that we've had based on other people's questions sparked something for you that you want to know.
Can
Rose
you read
is
that?
asking, is it different? Is the form different than the consent form on the online application for ETV and Passport?
I'm working on updating that with the ETV staff. I've sent them all of the program updates that I need. So I don't know if they've made those changes yet, but I'm hoping that it's aligned.
Great. Yeah. Kathy's asking, I've had students who are unsure of their date of last placement. Would you still verify with the appropriate agency if they wrote the wrong date?
Absolutely.
So the way that works, Kathy, is DCYF pushes information to WASAC about when the case was initiated, and that, or when the out-of-home placement occurred, the date of initial out-of-home placement, and that is what counts.
It has to do with the rollout of the program and the phase in implementation. So if a student was in foster care at age 13, but then exited care, so this year, the law says that they needed to have been in foster care after age 15, those students would not be eligible until 2020. Does that make sense? So that's why we put the date on there, but it's not required for us to do the check with each appropriate organization.
And if the student doesn't know the answer, you can still see, if they give you inaccurate information, you still see whatever DCYF shows you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Chris is asking, how long does it take for the consent form to be processed?
Honestly, we try to get it done as quickly as possible. So if we receive the consent form, I try to get it entered that day. And then it depends on workload over at DCYF. It depends on workload over here, but we do try to get that done as quickly as possible.
So what's the range for checking on state foster care? A couple days?
Yeah, probably.
But then, so for students that have been in state foster care, it's usually a couple of days for verification, but then what about tribal and federal right now?
So that's going to be different. With the tribal foster youth, it'll be when we are able to communicate with the tribe. And then for federal foster youth, we're working on agreements with DSHS so that we can collect that information much more quickly, like we do for the state dependents. So, gosh, with that, it's a little bit harder.
Does that answer your question, Krista? Okay, good. Maria's asking, if we verify a student is homeless, then how would you like us to report to you in order to receive funding?
So we're still working on that, Maria. And I've met with our IT liaison to help start thinking about developing a system so that the institution can come into our portal and possibly report it that way. So yeah, that's still to be determined. We're working on it though.
All right, let's see, thank you. Anything else that's on your mind that you want to share with folks, Dawn?
It's just, we're cranking away over here. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes, I know. And, at CSF, what we're trying to do is, if any of you have questions, you can ask us, and we can always, have a direct line to Dawn and her team. And the only benefit of asking a question through us is that we're tracking the questions that come up. And so we're trying to document and create tools and resources like frequently asked questions, documents, and stuff like that. So if you route questions through us, although Dawn is also tracking, it's really our job to try to most efficiently get information out to folks. So all these questions about homelessness, we're going to work on, as answers emerge, documenting those answers, getting them out on the website so that they're all written down in one place. So that's why I guess I would encourage you, if you have questions, to contact myself or Molly or Donna, and then we can work with Don and get you the information you need, but we can also get the information out to everyone else proactively.
And I did want to mention that the Passport Program Manual is currently, I'm calling it a living, breathing document, because there are updates being made in the program manual quite frequently as well. So know that there are changes that are being rolled out through that too.
Yeah, and if you catch any inconsistencies, or if you have any questions about that, like Laura, you recently pointed out a really good point on something that needed to be clarified. Please let us and Dawn know, and then we'll just work to clarify it. I know Dawn is creating, and her team is creating, a lot of documentation, and so one of the challenges is, as we update documentation, then sometimes other documents say something different.
Yep, exactly.
So we're trying to make sure everything is aligned as this information is rolled out, but there can be kind of a domino effect. Couple other questions. In reviewing the form you just showed, I did not see unaccompanied homeless youth language under eligibility. If it's not there, will it change?
Well, unaccompanied homeless youth are not eligible for Passport yet. That will not happen until July. And we are developing a separate form for unaccompanied homeless youth that are not able to verify through the financial aid office.
Okay, Hillary. So it's the new form is to come, and it's the first date a youth would be able to verify their passport eligibility is going to be July 1 if they've experienced unaccompanied homelessness. Okay. All right. Last call for questions. Well, I really appreciate your questions. It's really good discussion. It prompts a lot. I know for Dawn to think about in terms of, what's on people's minds and how we can get information out to people, just to make this as successful as possible for you and your students. I'll just end by saying that if you have more questions, Donna, Molly, and I can help along with Dawn. I hope you'll consider attending our next webinar, which is on resiliency, presented by the Coordinated Cares Community Education Team. It's going to be Wednesday, February 6th from 2 to 3. And we're going to send you all a survey at the conclusion of this webinar. And I really hope you'll complete it and let us know how we can keep making the webinars better, so you get the information you need from us. All right. Anything you want to say before we sign off, Dawn?
I think we're good. Thank you, everybody, for fighting the good fight for us.
All right, y'all. Thanks for attending. We'll see you next time.